Hi, my name is Sorcha, and today I'm going to talk about my experience and what it's like to live as a type 1 diabetic. I've had diabetes for a very, very long time. Pretty much almost half my life, to be honest. I got diagnosed in 2007 when I was 10 years old, and I'm now 25, so that's 15 years. So that's like pretty much more than half my life. It doesn't exactly make it any easier, to be honest. The longer you live with diabetes, certain things get easier, others don't. Diabetes is a very difficult medical condition to live with because there are times where you don't have very much control over what's going on in your body. For me, because I have loads of other medical conditions that I was getting from the age of 2 onwards, my parents were used to me being unwell a lot of the time. I was already in that kind of hospital setting, so I had doctors looking after me for loads of different things. So it was easy, they were able to keep an eye on me. So my symptoms thankfully were caught very quickly. The symptoms that I got were like extreme tiredness. I was always thirsty. I was just not, my mood wouldn't have been great. I would have been very, Irish word here, cravat. I've been very agitated a lot, and just my parents knew there just wasn't something right. So they brought me to hospital in Crumlin, Our Lady's Children's Hospital, and that was where I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We went down and they hadn't, the bed that I was going to have as an inpatient wasn't quite ready yet. So we went out to a shop, and I remember kind of when we were walking around the shop, I was very tired. And then so we stopped in a little cafe, and I remember getting a blueberry muffin. The reason why I'm mentioning this blueberry muffin is because to this day, I still feel like blueberry muffins gave me diabetes, which is completely irrational. It's not like I ate them every day either. But what happened was, because at that point my blood sugars were already quite high, we didn't know it yet, but they were, me eating that blueberry muffin tipped it over the edge. So by the time I got back to the hospital, I lay down, I fell asleep. My blood tests had come back to show that my blood sugars were literally through the roof, and I was not sleeping, I was in a coma. So that's how I was diagnosed. I was put onto a big, massive machine that was pumped insulin through me to get my blood sugars down, and when I woke up, I was told I have type 1 diabetes. So it was a pretty scary experience because when I woke up, I was in a completely different room. I was hooked up to all these machines. My mum looked really worried. My dad looked really worried. I didn't know what was happening. Once they told me, that the nurses and the doctors told me that I was now a type 1 diabetic, they explained what that meant. So they explained kind of in simple terms, obviously, because I was only 10 years old, what diabetes meant. That it meant that my pancreas had stopped working, and it meant what I had to do is I had to take my blood sugars, and I would have to take insulin, and I would also have to be careful with the types of food I ate as well. And in Crumlin, the way they do it is for the first year you're on injections, and then after that they will give you an insulin pump. That first year was literally the hardest year of my life and my parents' life, because keeping your blood sugar stable on injections, for me anyway, was so difficult because of all the other medical issues I have, medications I have to take for other things. They all interacted, and it was just a year from hell. So I would have had to take about 4, maybe 3 to 4 injections every day. That would have been my insulin. I would have also had to eat every 2 hours. So breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, snack. So a lot of food. The first time you get insulin, it makes you really, really hungry. I was hungry all the time. All I could think about was food, when I was going to eat next, what I was going to eat next. I had a wee diary that I wrote everything down in, and it was basically a food diary. It talked about what I had for dinner, what I was going to have for dinner, and that lasted a few months until my body adapted to getting insulin. It was very difficult. The people think diabetics can't eat sugar. That's not true. When we give insulin for our food, it depends how much carbohydrate is in that food. So yes, things like sweets, chocolate, fizzy drinks, they have a lot of sugar in them, and sugar is a carbohydrate. So yeah, you'd have to give like a load of insulin for that. And giving a load of insulin isn't really good, like, unless it's necessary. So yeah, I think that's kind of when I started to realise I had an interest in nutrition. Funny enough, learning about how to count carbohydrates was the first step for me. And just talking to dietitians, and I found it very easy counting carbs. Some people don't. I can remember things that I would eat quite regularly. I know by like eyeballing them how much carbs would be in them, and I think a lot of diabetics, once you've had diabetes for a while, you do that. The difficulty comes when you're eating out in restaurants. You're not quite sure how much carbohydrates in the food, so you're really guessing, and sometimes you're fine and you guess. You're never going to guess 100% right, but you guess near enough. But then sometimes you're way off, and your blood sugars either go really, really high or they go really low. So yeah, that's one thing that can make having diabetes quite hard, is eating out, eating foods that are pre-packaged, that you can't read the nutrition info on the back of them. Thankfully, after that year from hell, I was given one of these. So it's an insulin pump. Now, this obviously isn't the one that I got that first time. That was a while ago. You get a new one every 5 years or so, unless it breaks. This pump is a Medtronic insulin pump. It's not a wireless one, so this is the wire, and it goes into sight. So I normally put them in my legs or my back. I don't like putting it in my stomach. A lot of people would put them on their stomachs. I just don't like it there. I find it uncomfortable. This is my lifeline. If anything happens to my insulin pump, I would have to go back and take injections until it got fixed. I cannot live without insulin. A diabetic, type 1 diabetic, or anybody cannot live without insulin. So it's very important that it works. It gives me insulin for my food. It gives me a small bit of insulin all the time called basal rate. It basically works like a pancreas, as much as it could. Obviously, your own pancreas, you don't have to tell it what to do. It does it anyway. So that's my insulin pump. And then I also have a sensor. So where is it? It's in my arm now, and it is called a continuous glucose CGM, continuous glucose monitor. And what it does is there's a little tiny cannula, and it's so fine, it's like a little hair, and it tests the interstitial fluid in your wherever you have it. It doesn't test the blood, so there is always maybe a slight difference between the blood glucose levels, like if you prick your finger with the glucose monitor. So I also have this. So this is the little gun, and these are the little strips, and you put them in there, prick your finger, and it tests. So the number that would come up on this might be a little bit different from the one you get here, but it's usually pretty accurate. And what it does is it tests every couple of minutes, and it Bluetooths the result to my pump. And then what my pump can do is if I start to go low, it will like alarm and it will tell me so that I can go and get some sugar, or it'll also alarm if my blood sugars are going high so that I can take some insulin. So that has made my life a lot easier, definitely, especially at night time. It's not like you still have to be careful because it's a machine and it can't predict the future. So you really do have to get to know yourself when you're type 1 diabetic, how you feel, and everybody's different. Some people with type 1 diabetes, they feel fine when their blood sugars are sitting at 4.5. If my blood sugars are sitting at 4.5, to me, I'm low and I have to take something for that. So that is kind of the treatments I take on a day-to-day basis. I would check my blood sugars, and then the sensor has to be changed every week. So it's the white thing, it's the transmitter, and that you just charge that up. You do not throw that out. You change the little sensor in your arm. I put mine in my arm. Obviously, you could also put it in your stomach. Don't like doing that, so my arm it is. And that there will last you for a week. Unless you stupidly walk into walls or doors or tables like I tend to do and pull it out. That happens, but you have to be prepared for things like that. So I always have spares. Now I'm going to talk about what a hypo or a hypoglycemic event is. Hypo is when your blood sugars drop too low. So if you haven't eaten in a while, you know that dizzy feeling, that's your blood sugars have gone low. The difference is if you're not a diabetic, usually your body regulates itself. When you're diabetic, you need to treat it. So you would treat it with sugar. Now loads of foods have sugar in them, but things like fruit, pastries, chocolate, milk, dairy, they also have things like fat, fibre and protein in them. And that slows down your absorption of those foods. And when you're a diabetic and you're having a hypo, you need the sugar to get into your bloodstream fast. You need fast acting glucose. So that would be stuff like fizzy drinks. So Lucozade, Fanta, Coke, not the diet kind. Obviously, you want the sugar. Jelly sweets like Haribo's. What else? Yeah, boiled sweets also. Or I use these little things. They're like glucose shots, so fast acting glucose shots. They're not the best tasting of things, to be quite honest with you, but they have 15 grams of sugar in that small bottle, and you can just down them like a shot, and they do work, definitely. These are like glucose gels. You can get loads of different types of glucose gels. These ones also have 15 grams of sugar. There's no real taste off of them per se. They don't taste good, but they do the job. Then if things go really bad, you might need this. So this is glucagon. It's a glucagon hypo kit. Every diabetic should have one of these. You should technically carry it about with you in your bag, but it also needs to be kept in the fridge. So if you remember to take it out of the fridge every time you go somewhere, it's good. But it is an injection, an intramuscular injection that you would give to a type 1 diabetic if they're having a really bad hypo and they're unable to take things like this and they're fitting. So they would start shaking and then they would go really stiff, and you'd give them this. So you have to do it up. So there's this here, the powder. I've actually never looked in the box because it's normally on the other end of it. But you have to do it up. And then you just stick it into them. So it gives you the instructions there. It's not overly difficult, but I have to say, from being at the other end of it, literally, it is very painful. And when I wake up from having had one of those injections, I know that I've had it. I can feel it, but it saves your life. So what it does is, it's not sugar. It's a hormone that causes your liver to release glycogen, which is carbohydrates, and then that brings your sugars up. It's like last case scenario kind of thing. Actually, I don't think I've had to get it. No, I don't think I've had to get it. I think I get the hydrocortisone injection for my Addison's. Whole other video, whole other story. This gel is great. If you rub it around your gums, even if the person is not fully conscious, just be careful they don't bite your finger. They won't know they're doing it, and your jaw kind of goes stiff like the rest of your body. So basically they could bite your finger off, not intentionally, but be careful. Get it around their gums. Their gums, you'll absorb the glucose quicker, and these have brought me round from being unconscious. So that, and then after you've taken the fast acting sugar and your blood sugars start to come up, that's when you can have something like a biscuit or some toast or like a starchy carbohydrate, and that kind of prevents them from shooting up too high. Well, that's what it should do anyway. So that's kind of my treatment for hypos. Because I have other medical conditions, having a hypo is a lot. First of all, I mentioned Addison's. Addison's is a disease where I don't make adrenaline. And adrenaline is produced by your body in stressful situations, i.e. having a hypoglycemic event, which is why my mum kind of normally gives me that injection. And ironically, it actually also would bring up your blood sugars. So Addison's disease affects diabetes because when I'm stressed, the sugar is pulled out of my blood and it causes me to take hypos, and no matter how much sugar I take, they won't stay up. So I end up having to take extra steroids, which are the medications I take for Addison's. So that's how that affects the Addison's. Then because I have intestinal failure, if you'd like to watch my video on that, it explains what that is and what that means for me. But that means I don't always absorb my food. I don't always absorb all the sugar that I take. So it can take a lot longer for it to hit my bloodstream, to get enough to hit my bloodstream to make a difference. As well as that, these sugar things, they make me so sick afterwards. I know I have to take them though. There's no getting around it. But they swell my stomach up and I feel so unwell. So I don't particularly like having to treat hypos, but I have to. So yeah, that's hypos for you. They're no fun. So the normal range of blood glucose for everybody is between 4 and 8 millimoles. Now, I think in America they do have a different numbers or measurement or whatever, but it's 4 to 8 millimoles. For me, I feel low if I'm under 5, but it's different for most people. So I've told you what a hypo is and what I do to treat it, but the other thing is when you're having a hypoglycemic event, what a person acts like, what I act like. So I act completely different. I am very irrational. I sometimes make no sense. Whatever is in my head comes out. There's no filter. It can be quite funny thinking back about times I've been low, like different things I've done or said, but at the time it's maybe not so funny. Then sometimes I maybe having a hypo and it's not a serious one. They're not that low. I'm not shaking. I'm just acting strange. And there's a few stories from them kind of hypos as well. But most of my funny stories involve me being low. having hypo. So yeah, if you know somebody who's a diabetic and you've noticed that they start acting strange or just out of character, it might be a good idea to maybe ask them if they need to check their blood sugars, or and actually something, if I am low and somebody asks me to check my blood sugars, I'm very likely to argue with them, which is a sign that I'm probably low. So if they argue with you, I don't know, hold them down. Don't hold them down. That's just something to be aware of. But if they're acting really rude, really loud, obnoxious, and they're not normally like that, then that's a sign that they might be low. Just finally now, how having type 1 diabetes affects me on a day-to-day basis. It is one of the more difficult medical conditions to live with, because, like I said at the start of this video, it can be very difficult to control it. There's days, things like if you're sick and if your hormone levels are all over the place, that affects them. Excitement affects them. Disappointment, well, for me anyway, excitement affects them. Disappointment, stress affects them. Exam time was terrible for me. It all affects them, and you can't control everything. So the best you can do is try to keep an eye on your blood sugars, kind of see any patterns, try to fix them, and just do what your diabetic nurse tells you. To make sure you eat healthy as you can, and always be prepared. When you're diabetic, you really should be bringing stuff like this with you all the time, because you don't know when you're going to have a low blood sugar event. And if you don't have something, it's going to be a lot more stressful for you and whoever's with you, if there is anybody with you to help you. So always have stuff with you. As well as that, for me, it kind of means I lost a lot of my independence. Partially because of all my other medical conditions affecting my diabetes is very irregular. And that's through no fault of my own. I do everything I can for her. But there's no rhyme or reason to my blood sugars. So I can't be left alone at night, because when I'm sleeping, if I take a hypo while I'm sleeping and my insulin pump is buzzing and alarming to tell me to wake up, there has been times I've slept through it, and I mean it's loud, as in my mum and dad can hear it in their room, and it's attached to me, and I'm in such a deep sleep I don't wake up. Obviously the pretty bad lows where I'm unconscious, I don't know why I held that up, because like I said, I haven't had it before, but where I go unconscious, they mostly happen at night, but there has been a few during the day. Other times, there's been times my blood sugars, they just start to shoot down, and I can't think why. I haven't done any physical activity, and then I don't always know when I'm stressed. You don't always know when you're stressed. So that means that I can't really go places on my own. There's always has to be somebody nearby in case of emergencies. And that's difficult for me, because I would consider myself quite an independent person. And my parents obviously worry about me a lot, because they've seen me have bad hypos, and they know that when my blood sugars are low, even when I'm not having a fit, I'm not 100% sensible. I've kind of programmed myself now that I know low blood sugar, get sugar, call somebody. So that's my routine. Now, that means that if I'm in the house and my dad's out in the farm, I know he's about, so I'll ring him, or whoever I know is kind of closer. But then they have to be there quickly, because otherwise, number one, I start panicking, and number two, then when I start panicking, it makes my blood sugar go lower. So yeah, that's the most difficult part. But being a diabetic, if you do look after it as best you can and try to control your blood sugars as best you can, if you feel that things aren't right, get it looked about as quick as you can, then you can live a very normal life with type 1 diabetes. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like it. Also, if you want to learn more about my chronic medical conditions, please subscribe because I'm doing a playlist on all of them. So far, I already have one up about my intestinal failure, so check that out. Also, if you are a type 1 diabetic, are you on an insulin pump or a CGM? If you are, please comment below and tell me what make or brand you're on. Do you like it? Would you like to change? I've only ever had Medtronic, so I'd like to hear what the other ones are like, and maybe also what your experience is like living with type 1 diabetes, because like I said, this is my experience. Everybody's is different. Maybe there's things you find difficult that you find solutions to that help me out here, like maybe it might help me or somebody else with type 1 diabetes. Also, there is a great website, diabetesireland.ie. They have loads of information on all different types of diabetes, so type 1, type 2, gestational, all of the types of diabetes, different things like nutrition advice, meal plans. There's also a test on there that you can take if you are nervous, you think that maybe you might be developing diabetes, so kind of type 2 diabetes, how high a risk are you of developing type 2 diabetes. So that's always good to know, because sometimes type 2 diabetes runs in families as well. And yeah, it's just a really good website. They've been very helpful for me in the past doing projects, so the link to that is below in the description box, so please check that out, and thanks for watching.